Welcome to True Crime Lineage Channel, where we dive into real stories that shake the core of human relationships. Today's case is one of shocking betrayal, twisted emotions, and a tragic ending that no one saw coming. So let's begin. In a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, lived the small Hartman family. Amelia Hartman, a 21-year-old student at the local college, and her mother Mary, a 45-year-old nurse, led a calm and measured life. Their home, a modest two-story house on Maple Street, was a place where they found comfort and support for each other. After Amelia's father's death 5 years ago, Amelia was a diligent student studying psychology. She dreamed of becoming a clinical psychologist and helping people cope with life's difficulties. The young woman often spent evenings with her textbooks, sitting in a cozy armchair in the living room while her mother prepared dinner in the kitchen. Their relationship was warm and trusting. They often shared their thoughts and concerns with each other. Mary Hartman worked as a senior nurse at the city hospital. She was a respected professional, known for her professionalism and care for patients. After her husband's death, Mary fully devoted herself to work and raising her daughter. She was a strong woman who managed to cope with the loss and create a stable life for herself and Amelia. Their daily life was filled with simple joys, shared dinners, walks in the park on weekends, trips to the movies. Amelia and Mary were not only mother and daughter, but also best friends. They supported each other in everything, and it seemed that nothing could disturb their idyll. However, life is unpredictable and fate was preparing serious trials for the Hartman family. No one could have predicted that an ordinary day at the hospital would become the beginning of a chain of events that would forever change their lives. It all began on an ordinary spring day when a patient with a serious injury was admitted to the emergency department where Mary worked. This patient turned out to be Richard Pierce, a 50-year-old successful businessman and influential member of the city council. Richard had been in a car accident, and Mary was assigned as his attending nurse. During Richard's stay in the hospital, a connection developed between him and Mary. He was charmed by her professionalism and care, and she found him an interesting conversationalist. After being discharged, Richard continued to communicate with Mary, inviting her for coffee and dinners. Their relationship developed rapidly, and just 3 months later, Richard proposed to Mary. For Amelia, the news of her mother's impending marriage came as a surprise. She was happy to see her mother happy, but at the same time felt anxious. The young woman worried that the appearance of a new person in their lives could disrupt the harmony that she and her mother had created over the years. Mary and Richard's wedding was a modest ceremony in the city park. Amelia was the bridesmaid, and although she smiled and congratulated the newlyweds, worry grew inside her. Richard seemed like the perfect gentleman, attentive, generous, caring. But something in his gaze, in the way he sometimes looked at Amelia, made her uncomfortable. After the wedding, Richard moved into the Hartman's house. He insisted that Amelia continue to live with them, arguing that he wanted to get to know his new family better. The first weeks passed relatively calmly. Richard tried to be attentive to both women, often bringing gifts and arranging family dinners in expensive restaurants. However, gradually Amelia began to notice changes in her mother's behavior. Mary became more withdrawn, sharing her thoughts and feelings with her daughter less often. She seemed to have distanced herself, completely immersed in the new relationship. This worried Amelia, but she tried to convince herself that it was normal for newlyweds. Over time, Amelia began to notice alarming changes in Richard's behavior. His glances in her direction became more intense and inappropriate. Several times she caught him standing at the door of her room, allegedly passing by. These incidents caused the girl strong discomfort, but she didn't dare to share her concerns with her mother, fearing to spoil her happiness. One evening, when Mary was on night duty at the hospital, Richard tried to enter Amelia's room under the pretext of checking a leaking pipe. The girl refused to let him in, feeling that this was just an excuse. After this incident, she began to lock the door at night. Amelia tried to talk to her mother about her stepfather's strange behavior, but Mary brushed off her words, attributing everything to her daughter's youthful suspiciousness. "Richard is just trying to find common ground with you," she would say. But Amelia felt that it wasn't just about that. Tension in the house grew. Amelia tried to spend as little time alone with Richard as possible, staying late at college or with friends. She noticed that her stepfather began to control the family's finances, demanding an account from Mary for every amount spent moreover. He insisted that Mary reduce her hours at the hospital, arguing that he was concerned about her health. Mary gradually changed. She became silent, often looking tired and depressed. Amelia noticed bruises on her mother's arms, but Mary always found plausible explanations. She hid herself on a door. She stumbled on the stairs. However, the girl suspected that something more sinister was behind these explanations. The relationship between Amelia and Richard became increasingly tense. She tried to avoid him, but at the same time tried to gather evidence of his inappropriate behavior. Amelia began to keep a diary recording all the strange incidents and her suspicions. She hoped that one day she would be able to convince her mother of Richard's true nature. One night, Amelia woke up to the sound of breaking glass. She heard a loud argument between Mary and Richard, followed by a dull thud. The girl's heart clenched with fear. She wanted to leave the room, but fear paralyzed her. In the morning, Mary appeared with a black eye, which she tried to hide with makeup. To her daughter's questions, she just brushed them off, saying she had fallen awkwardly. This incident was the last straw for Amelia. She decided that she could no longer remain silent and had to do something to protect her mother from abuse. The girl began to look for ways to get help without endangering her mother's safety. On one autumn evening, Amelia returned home from college later than usual. Entering the house, she immediately felt that something was wrong. There was an oppressive silence. The girl called for her mother, but there was no answer. Going up to the second floor, Amelia found Mary lying motionless on the bedroom floor. Amelia's heart raced wildly. She rushed to her mother, trying to feel for a pulse, but it was already too late. Mary wasn't breathing. Next to the body lay an empty package of sleeping pills. Amelia panicked and called for an ambulance and the police. The medical team that arrived at the scene pronounced Mary Hartman dead. A preliminary examination showed that death occurred as a result of an overdose of sleeping pills. The police began an investigation considering versions of suicide and murder. Richard Pierce arrived home soon after the police arrived. He looked shocked and confused to the police officers' questions. He replied that he had spent the whole day at important business meetings and couldn't contact his wife. Richard claimed that he didn't know of any problems Mary might have had that could have led to suicide. Amelia was in a state of shock. She couldn't believe that her mother could voluntarily take her own life. Memories of the past months raced through the girl's head about Richard's strange behavior, about the bruises on her mother's body, about her depressed state. Everything indicated that Mary's death was neither accidental nor voluntary. The police conducted an initial questioning of Amelia and Richard. The girl, still in a state of strong emotional shock, told about her suspicions regarding Richard's abusive treatment of Mary. However, her words sounded confusing and unconvincing against the background of her stepfather's calm and logical explanations. A thorough examination was conducted in the Hartman's house. Forensic experts looked for clues that could shed light on the circumstances of Mary's death. They found several scratches on the bedroom floor and signs of a struggle, but these clues were not conclusive. The investigation dragged on. The police couldn't find enough evidence to definitively qualify Mary's death as murder. The suicide version seemed increasingly likely, especially given the presence of antidepressants in the deceased's blat. Amelia couldn't come to terms with the thought that her mother could have committed suicide. She was sure that Richard was somehow involved in Mary's death. The girl began her own investigation, trying to find evidence of her stepfather's guilt. After Mary Hartman's funeral, the official investigation into her death continued. Detective Jason Morris, an experienced investigator with 15 years of experience in the homicide department, was appointed lead on this case. He carefully studied all available evidence and witness testimonies. Morris began by reinterrogating Richard Pierce. Amelia's stepfather remained confident and calm, detailing his schedule on the day of Mary's death. He provided the detective with a breakdown of his mobile phone calls and a list of contacts he had met with that day. All of Richard's alibis were confirmed. Then the detective focused on studying the family's financial situation. He discovered that shortly before her death, Mary had taken out a large life insurance policy, with Richard listed as the beneficiary. This information made Morris take a closer look at Pierce's motives. Parallel to this, Amelia continued her own investigation. She carefully looked through her mother's belongings, hoping to find something that could shed light on the circumstances of her death. In one of the dresser drawers, the girl discovered Mary's hidden diary. The entries in it were fragmentary and encrypted, but Amelia was sure she could decipher them. Detective Morris also paid attention to the oddities in Amelia's behavior. The girl seemed too tense and suspicious for someone who had just lost a close relative. He decided to conduct a more detailed, failed questioning of Amelia to better understand her relationship with her mother and stepfather. During this interrogation, Amelia told the detective about her suspicions regarding Richard's inappropriate behavior and the bruises she had noticed on her mother's body. However, without concrete evidence, these accusations seemed unfounded. Morris noted the girl's emotional state and decided to check her alibi for the day of Mary's death. New facts emerged during the investigation. Neighbors reported that they often heard loud arguments in the Hartman's house. Mary's colleagues from the hospital said that recently she had looked depressed and detached. This information could confirm both the version of domestic violence and the possibility of suicide. Detective Morris also noticed strange behavior from some family friends. One of Mary's friends, Sarah Johnson, was clearly nervous during the questioning and seemed to be hiding something. Morris decided to dig deeper in this direction. Meanwhile, the results of the toxicology examination showed the presence in Mary's blood not only of sleeping pills, but also traces of a strong sedative that had not been prescribed to her. This discovery called into question the suicide version and forced the investigation to more seriously consider the possibility of murder. As the investigation progressed, Detective Morris began to pay more and more attention to Amelia's behavior. Her persistent accusations against Richard, in the absence of weighty evidence, aroused suspicions. Moreover, it turned out that Amelia didn't have a solid alibi for the time of her mother's death. Morris decided to conduct a repeat interrogation of Amelia, this time in more detail. During the conversation, the girl was nervous, getting confused in her testimony about her whereabouts on the day of Mary's death. She claimed she was in a college library, but surveillance cameras didn't record her presence there at the specified time. The detective also discovered that shortly before her death, Mary had withdrawn a large sum of money from her bank account. This money was not found in a house, and neither Richard nor Amelia could explain where it had gone. There was a suggestion that Amelia might have taken this money. During a search of Amelia's room, notes were found about the effects of various medicinal drugs, including the sedative traces of which were found in Mary's blood. The girl explained this by her interest in psychology and pharmacology, but Detective Morris found it suspicious. Questioning Amelia's friends revealed that recently she had been complaining about difficult relationships with her mother. Some mentioned that Amelia had talked about wanting to start an independent life. But her financial situation didn't allow her to move out from her parents. Richard Pierce, learning of the suspicions regarding Amelia, expressed shock and disbelief. He told the detective about recent conflicts between Amelia and Mary related to the girl's finances and lifestyle. According to Richard, Mary was dissatisfied with her daughter's academic performance in college and threatened to stop her financial support. All these facts made the investigation seriously consider the version of Amelia's involvement in her mother's death. The motive could be both financial problems and the desire to get rid of control from the parents. Detective Morris decided to check information about Amelia's recent purchases. It turned out that a week before Mary's death, the girl had purchased a book about poisons and their effects on the human body from an online store. Although Amelia claimed that this was related to her studies, such a purchase in a context of what had happened looked extremely suspicious. In addition, analysis of Amelia's computer showed that she often visited forums where ways to imitate suicide were discussed. Although the girl explained this by her interest in criminal psychology, the investigation regarded this information as possible crime planning. All these facts together led to Amelia turning from a witness into the main suspect. Detective Morris made the decision to detain her for further questioning. Richard Pierce seemed shocked by this turn of events and expressed full readiness to cooperate with the investigation. After Amelia's detention, the investigation entered a new phase. Detective Morris and his team began to more carefully study all available evidence, trying to find irrefutable proof of the girl's guilt or innocence. The first important discovery was the analysis of Mary's diary, which Amelia had previously discovered. Forensic experts were able to decipher the entries and found that Mary was indeed suffering from domestic violence. However, the entries didn't give a clear understanding of who exactly was the aggressor, Richard or Amelia. Parallel to this, technical experts completed the analysis of Amelia's computer and phone. They discovered deleted messages and files that were able to be recovered. Among them were Amelia's correspondence with an unknown person, in which ways of getting rid of a problem were discussed. Although Mary's name wasn't directly mentioned, the context of the correspondence suggested that it was above her. Detective Morris also paid attention to the strange behavior of some family friends. After repeated questioning, Sarah Johnson, Mary's friend, admitted that she had withheld important information. It turned out that a few days before her death, Mary had turned to her with a request to help install hidden cameras in the house. Mary suspected that something was wrong but didn't know who to trust. This information gave new impetus to the investigation. Technical experts immediately began searching for hidden cameras in the Hartman's house. To everyone's surprise, they discovered a miniature camera skillfully disguised in the wall clock in Mary's bedroom. Analysis of the camera recordings became a real breakthrough in the case. The video recorded how, on the night of Mary's death, Richard entered the room. He argued with Mary for a long time about something, then a struggle broke out between them. At some point, Richard took out a syringe and gave Mary an injection, after which she lost consciousness. Further footage showed how Richard staged a suicide, laying out pills and an empty package of sleeping pills next to Mary's body. Then he carefully destroyed all traces of his presence in the room. This irrefutable evidence completely changed the course of the investigation. Detective Morris immediately ordered the arrest of Richard Pierce. However, when the police arrived at his home, it turned out that Richard had disappeared. A large-scale operation to search for Richard Pierce began. All airports, train stations, and border crossings were notified. Richard's photographs were sent to all police departments in the country. Meanwhile, Amelia was released from custody. Detective Morris personally apologized to her for the erroneous suspicions. It turned out that the mysterious correspondence on her computer concerned not Mary, but problems with studies that Amelia was trying to solve. After 3 days of intensive searches, Richard Pierce was detained while attempting to cross the border into Canada. Fake documents and a large amount of cash were found on him. During interrogation, Richard initially denied his guilt, but faced with irrefutable evidence, he broke down and confessed to everything. He said that he killed Mary because of her intention to divorce him and deprive him of access to her fortune. Richard didn't know about the existence of the hidden camera and was sure that he had perfectly covered all traces. The arrest of Richard Pierce and the revelation of the true circumstances of Mary Hartman's death shocked the public. The case received wide resonance in local and national media, becoming the subject of numerous discussions and debates. The trial of Richard was short but intense. Thanks to irrefutable evidence, including a video recording of the murder, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Richard Pierce was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Amelia Hartman, exonerated and freed from all suspicions, faced the difficult task of rebuilding her life after the nightmare she had experienced. She continued her studies at college, but now chose a new direction: criminology, inspired by the work of Detective Morris and the desire to help other victims of unjust accusations. Detective Jason Morris received a promotion for solving this complex case. However, the experience of erroneously suspecting Amelia made him reconsider his working methods. He began to pay more attention to careful verification of all versions, even those that at first glance seem unlikely. The Hartman case drew attention to the problem of domestic violence and the importance of timely seeking help. Many women's organizations use this case to promote initiatives to protect victims of domestic violence and improve the system of response to such situations. Sarah Johnson, Mary's friend, long blamed herself for not telling about Mary's suspicions earlier. She became an active volunteer in an organization helping victims of domestic violence, striving to use her bitter experience to help others. The Hartman's house, which had become the site of the tragedy, stood empty for a long time. No one wanted to buy it because of its grim history. Eventually, Amelia made the decision to donate the house to the local community. After reconstruction, it opened as a support center for victims of domestic violence, named in honor of Mary Hartman. This case became an important lesson for all participants and observers. It showed how easy it is to make mistakes in judgments based on superficial evidence and preconceived opinions. The story of Amelia and Mary Hartman reminded society of the importance of the presumption of innocence and thorough investigation of each case for forensic experts. This case became an example of how important even the smallest details are and how modern technology can help in solving what seemed to be a perfect crime. Mary Hartman's use of hidden cameras to protect herself became a turning point in the investigation. Ultimately, the tragic story of the Hartman family left a deep mark on the public consciousness, becoming a reminder that behind external well-being, a terrible truth can be hidden, and of the need to be attentive to those around us. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.